We're meeting Professor Margaret Burnett and Assistant Professor Christopher Scafidi from Oregon State University. In this interview, they will share their thoughts on future directions within the field of end-user development. The Web 2.0 technologies are increasing, and users around the world are producing apps and sharing code, etc. So do you see this technology and movement as a part of end-user development?
It sort of is. So the part where users are creating things and sharing it on the web, whether that's code or data, that's definitely EUD, because you have users making something that they probably are also using, so they're user developers, and they're sharing it with other people as just sort of a pleasant byproduct. There is one aspect of Web 2.0 which isn't very EUD-ish right now, which is that a lot of the protocols used for communicating over Web 2.0 are pretty complicated. You need to know how to parse data and format data in certain ways. And the complexity of that gets in the way of its use by ordinary people. Just anybody who wants to make a program that talks over the web has to learn probably a stack of 3 or 4 different technologies. And that kind of gets in the way of end-user development over Web 2.0. But other than that, it's a success story, and it's an increasing success story. And at the risk of overhyping something that's already been overhyped, I do think that Web 2.0 is a really wonderful thing for the world.
Okay, so what about the future challenges? End-user development has been argued for and against. What do you see as challenges in order to improve end-user development?
Well, in the context of Web 2.0, let's suppose that your Aunt Nancy wrote a piece of code, put it up on the web. Would you download and use it?
Probably not.
Well,
I guess I wouldn't find it either.
Maybe not. It's still a very hard thing to go and find something useful, ascertain that it's useful, modify it for your own use, because they're user developers, they're not designing for your use, they're designing for their own use. And they're happy to share it maybe, but it still may not fit your use context. So reusing existing code off the web is very hard sometimes if it's been coded by an end-user developer. And I think there's also a massive security problem that still exists with end-user code to this day, that end users don't know how to design secure code. In fact, a lot of professionals still struggle with this in some ways. And we don't really have a great way to go and scan end-user code for malware or unintentional security holes, or possible ways in which it would compromise our privacy. So these are, I think, serious impediments to actively pursuing a more full-featured Web 2.0 vision.
If you should pay some advice to people working in industry as well as people working in academia regarding end-user development, what is the most important thing to explore when you want to design software which users can create, modify, and extend?
So this is my opportunity to tell you about one of my favorite techniques. And it's one of my favorites because it's very easy to do, and it keeps people honest when they're thinking about who could potentially use their wonderful new end-user development technique. And I call it audience prerequisites. And so when you're developing a new idea, a new tool, whether you're in research or in industry, you have this impression often that, oh, it's so easy to use, everybody will be able to use it. And so what I always advise people to do is to take inventory of the concepts that are needed within your language. And I call these audience prerequisites. And so the idea is you've got this chair and you're expecting a user to sit in it. So what prerequisites are required before you're going to let somebody sit in that chair? And so if you make your tool very complex, then the list of prerequisites is going to be bigger. So let's say, for example, you're working on an end-user programming tool, and let's say it has loops and recursion and subclasses in it. So that says that the list of prerequisites, before somebody's allowed to sit in that chair, they have to understand loops and subclasses and recursion. So that's a pretty scary list. And once they realize that, then they say, okay, we'll get rid of recursion. So now you've got one less thing on the list, which means that there are more people that can come to your chair. You say, well, okay, we'll get rid of loops. So now more people. Okay, we'll get rid of all of these things. But of course, the more things you get rid of, maybe, you know, the fewer things you have to brag about in your wonderful new tool. And so there's some certain trade-offs that you're making there too. So I really like audience prerequisites because it seems like it really brings out the trade-offs that you're making and allows you to make intelligent decisions instead of just blindly assuming that more features are better and that sometimes complexity is better. It just makes you really be aware of who you're actually designing for. So that's my favorite tip.
Excellent. So, Margaret, what are you going to focus on in the future?
Well, there are a lot of possibilities. It's a huge open space. So I'll just talk about the near future. So there are two projects that we've started fairly recently that we're really excited about. One of them is the work on gender and how that relates to end-user development. So we're very, very excited about that. We have lots of plans for the future. The other one is end-user software engineering issues in an emerging type of software that people haven't studied very much yet, and those are intelligent assistants. So intelligent assistants are partly written by professional developers, but not entirely. The way it works is, you know, some professional developer who's a specialist in artificial intelligence of some sort, usually it's machine learning, creates the beginnings of an intelligent assistant back in their lab, and they do all kinds of testing and debugging and everything else and get it in pretty good shape. And then, you know, the company sells it and people buy it, and it ends up, say, for example, on your mobile phone. Well, at that point, things that you do inform the assistant, and it learns from that. That's why they're called intelligent assistants, is they learn from your data. Now, the problem is, if something goes wrong, it's on your mobile phone. That artificial intelligence researcher who devised it in the first place is long gone, not on the scene. And even though the software that you bought might have been really good software, it's at the mercy of the quality of the data that happened to arrive when it was learning. And so it could go very wrong. And there's nobody around now to debug it except you. And so you may not be at all versed in how you debug or test or have any idea of how to proceed. And in some cases, maybe the intelligent assistant, maybe it doesn't matter if it goes wrong. It's just recommending restaurants or something, and maybe you don't care. But sometimes it really matters. It may be something important about your driving, or if it's not on your phone, if, say, for example, it's in your home security system, you know, then there could be very important repercussions, and you may really, really need to make sure that this is working okay. So we've been working on ways for users to try to figure out how much of such an assistant they can trust, and when they can see areas where the assistant is not trustworthy, we're working on ways for them to figure out how to tell it to do better. So that's actually an end-user software engineering problem, because here we are talking about testing and debugging, but it's especially challenging because it's in software that they didn't write, and in fact software that's represented in such an odd way that nobody would want to debug it directly. So it's very challenging in terms of figuring out the representations and the problem-solving processes that end users might be able to bring to bear on it, and so it's a very interesting area of research for us.
Interesting. And Christopher, what are you going to focus on?
Well, my plan is sort of an integrated research education vision. On the research side, particularly on the software engineering side, I'm focused on enhancing the quality of the code that end users create by providing the tools with a higher level of understanding about the semantics of the code, so that the tools can reason about whether or not the code is doing something correct or not correct, but also so that it can facilitate other qualities, like reusability and security that I keep on talking about, but there are lots of other quality attributes too. For instance, if a tool can identify a semantically meaningful chunk of a spreadsheet, then it could provide support for reusing that chunk as a chunk. In professional programmers, we have these nice ideas of components and interfaces and so forth. We don't have that explicitly in the world of end-user development right now. But if the tools were able to carve out chunks, then they could identify implicit boundaries within pieces of code, larger structures, and be able to implicitly then go and grab the code that's related to the particular functionality. And there are some techniques from software engineering that we can adapt, such as code slicing for use in this context. Or as another, for instance, if web scripting tools were able to identify particular sections inside of code that had the semantics of behavior that is likely to steal a person's cookie and send it off to another website, then they could actually go and look for that and identify it, bring it to the user's attention and say, do you really want to install this script that somebody posted on the web for you to use? And like I said earlier in the previous interview, I've seen a script that does just this. It's there waiting for people to install it. Drive-by, so to speak. People don't realize it. They'll click the install button for some other thing, and this other script will be carried along with it. So this is, I think, very important if we want to give users the ability to trust code that's available for them from other anonymous users. As far as education, I see end-user development, and in fact all software engineering more broadly, as a human activity. So there's a risk in getting so excited about the tools and making fancy software that we forget that it's possible to enhance the human side also. And in particular, I'm developing approaches so that users or professional programmers can acquire new skills on demand without having to go to some series of classes or a seminar on how to do programming in order to learn how to use the features that are available within an existing tool. Some of these strategies have to do with crowdsourcing, for instance, drawing on the wisdom of other people and mining educational materials out of the work that other people have done, automatically or semi-automatically. And some of this work is around the area of new interfaces that teach users how to accomplish particular tasks on demand. So then they don't have to give up their regular livelihood as a teacher or an accountant or a marketing specialist or a scientist or an engineer. They can keep doing that and not have to go back to school and become a professional programmer to be successful in their work.
So you both seem really into end-user development. And what first got you into it? What caught your interest?
Oh, interesting. So I started in visual programming, and eventually I came to realize that visual programming is a mechanism, and what I should really be focusing on is the policy that mechanism is trying to implement. And so the policy is, let's see if we can come up with languages and environments that make software development easier for various populations of users. So once I started taking a more user-centered approach to, well, what are we really trying to accomplish, rather than a mechanism approach, let's just see what we can do with this mechanism, I think I got outside the box more, and then I started exploring more widely and headed in that direction. But I think one of the catalysts was when I first met one of my close collaborators for a number of years, Greg Rothermill. And so at the time, I thought I was, I thought of what I did still as visual programming. And he was a software engineering researcher, especially with expertise in testing. And so the two of us are the ones who came up with the notion of WYSIWYT, which I described earlier, what you see is what you test. And so that's really what turned me directly to end users, because we knew we were aiming at an end user programming audience at that point. So that was a huge catalyst. And then I guess another huge catalyst was when Greg and I had the idea of starting the EUSES Consortium, which is a group of collaborators who are all working together on the end-user software engineering problem. And so there were 10 of us that started this consortium, and we've stuck together over the years. And so now Chris is the project director. For a while I was. And I've learned from all of the people who helped me start that. So that was also a huge influence on my thinking in a number of ways. But I especially want to talk about one of the people who was involved with that from the very beginning, and that was Kurt Cook, who passed away, unfortunately, not too long ago. And Kurt was one of the pioneers in the empirical studies of programming community that started back in the 70s, and he helped to start it. And he was a professor at my university. And when I first got there, I was very tool-oriented. Let's build this, let's build that. And he was very empirically oriented. And I thought, oh, thank heavens there are people that do that, because I don't want to do it, and I know it has to be done. And he was very mild-mannered, and he thought that was great. I'd give a talk somewhere about visual programming, and he'd say, wow, it's great your talk went so well. He said, of course, you're preaching to the choir. And he'd say, we really ought to study this. And, okay, sure, Kurt, we can do this. Go ahead, sure. And so we started collaborating, and he was doing all the empirical work, and I was doing all the tool building. But, I seem to have opinions on things when I'm collaborating with people, as maybe Chris can attest to. And so I'd get more and more involved in the design of the experiments and more involved in the analysis. And as time went on, I found myself more and more interested in that aspect of the work as well. And by the time Kurt retired, after we collaborated for, goodness, I don't know, 14 or 15 years, I think that he had been a co-author on probably 3/4 of the papers I wrote. And he had taught me pretty much everything he knew and given me a huge enthusiasm for that area. So everything that I do always now has an empirical component because to me, it's obvious. It's the only, you can't do work for end user developers and not evaluate it by empirically studying end user developers. So, and he never actually said that. He just smiled and did his thing, and I just got drawn in more and more. So I guess I learned from him personally too, because he never tried to impose his beliefs on other people. He just demonstrated, and eventually you got it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he was a huge influence.
My experience was kind of the opposite. Because when I was a professional software engineer, I got really excited by the user experience. The use of color to communicate the shapes and the position of things on the screen. And I wouldn't claim to be, an artist or even have fabulous aesthetic sense, but the experience of the user is something I really cared about. And so I had heard it when the users told me, we want to have the ability to customize this software. And then I listened to them tell me what they were looking for, and I provided them the features they asked for. We didn't call it end user development, We didn't know the word.
No. Mm-hmm.
We were just giving our users what they were asking for. And, eventually I noticed that I was providing the same sort of thing over and over again. I began to see it as a repeating pattern. And I thought, well, shouldn't I be the one making the tools rather than the one making the applications, the customizable applications? I should just make tools for people, and then they can go and do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. And I kind of bought into the vision of democratizing computing, which that's what end user development is really all about, is the democratization of computing, giving people the ability to control how they experience software. And that got me excited enough to go and do it as a career, which is what I'm now doing as a professor. And I've gradually been pulling in more technical skills and tips and techniques and tricks, There's an awful lot of sophisticated tooling that has been developed over the years that can be brought to bear on the problem of end user development. And so I'm gradually acquiring more and more sort of technically oriented approaches over time. Mm-hmm. And
so you're really a good couple.
I guess we work together well. Yeah. So I'm excited to know that end user development is here, and I think of it as nuclear power for the masses and not a nuclear bomb. I really believe that we can make it something that can change the world in the next 15 years.
Excellent. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Looking forward to the next 15 years.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Margaret and Christopher, for sharing some of your knowledge and perspectives on end user development.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
And if you want to know more, you should have a look at the other interviews with Margaret and Christopher. And you should also read that chapter at interactiondesign.org. At our website, you can find many other interesting chapters, all written by thought leaders and inventors. Thank you so much for watching.